The film begins in the middle of a vast ocean where a man is drifting alone. He is staying afloat on a small life raft, surrounded by an endless expanse of dark blue water. This man's name is Allison. He served in the United States Navy. The submarine he was on was attacked by the enemy during the Pacific War, and he was the only one who survived. For 7 whole days, he fought for his life in the open sea, without food and barely any strength. His only source of water was rainwater, which he collected. Exhausted and overwhelmed by loneliness, he was on the verge of despair, until one morning he noticed the faint outline of land on the horizon. Gathering his last strength, he directed his raft toward it and eventually reached a remote island in the southern Pacific. Despite his weakness, he felt a slight sense of relief when he finally stepped onto solid ground. While exploring the island, Allison discovered a small village that appeared to be abandoned. The houses were empty with no one inside. He kept walking and soon came across an old church standing among the trees. At that moment, he froze when he saw a woman calmly sweeping the floor inside the church, as if services were still being held there. She was dressed entirely in white and looked gentle and graceful. Allison stood still for a moment, surprised that someone was living on such a remote island, especially a young woman. She was also startled to see him, but once she learned he was an American serviceman, she calmed down. In a soft voice, she introduced herself as Sister Angela, a nun who had also ended up on the island under difficult circumstances. Angela then told her story. She had been part of a religious mission in Fiji, but when Japanese forces began attacking missionaries and hunting them down, many were captured and killed. She survived only because she managed to escape to this island. At first, she was not alone. A priest named Father Philippe was with her, but he died just 4 days after they arrived on the island. Since then, Angela had lived alone, relying on prayer and her faith that one day American forces would come and rescue her. She knew the chances were small, since at that time the Southern Pacific was under Japanese control, but she continued to believe. After hearing her story, Allison felt sympathy for her and promised to help. He planned to build a raft using the rubber float that had saved him at sea so they could leave the island together. Fortunately, the island had plenty of plants and fruits they could eat. As the days passed, they grew closer. Angela, with her gentle nature and unwavering faith, gradually taught Allison, who was tough and not very religious, what it meant to never lose hope. One day, Allison asked why a young woman like her had decided to become a nun. Angela smiled calmly and answered that she did it out of pure love for God. Sometime later, while walking along the beach, Angela saw a turtle swimming toward the shore. Allison took the opportunity to teach her how to survive in the wild. Using simple tools, they tried to catch the turtle, and after a tough struggle, Allison managed to pull it onto the shore. They cooked the meat and ate it together. For Allison, it was a small victory in survival. For Angela, it was a lesson in how harsh life in the wild could be. A few days passed peacefully, but one afternoon they heard the sound of an airplane overhead. Looking up, they were horrified to see a Japanese aircraft circling the island. Allison immediately grabbed Angela's hand and pulled her into a cave among large rocks to hide. They stayed awake all night, fearing the plane might have spotted signs of life. Their fears were confirmed the next morning when the ground shook from a sudden explosion. The Japanese plane dropped bombs and destroyed the entire village. When they came out of hiding, Allison saw that nothing remained of the houses, including the raft they had been building. All their food supplies had burned to ashes. The situation became even more difficult. Soon, several Japanese ships approached the shore, and troops landed on the island. They set up tents and turned the island into a temporary base. The situation became extremely dangerous. One small mistake could cost them their lives. Allison told Angela to stay in the cave while he went out to search for food. Japanese soldiers patrolled the forest, but fortunately they did not find the cave where the two were hiding. The next day, Allison bravely went to the shore to catch fish. On his way back, he noticed a flashlight beam in the distance, a sign that Japanese soldiers were patrolling nearby. Without hesitation, he dove into the water and hid among the waves until the patrol boat passed. After the danger was gone, he returned to the cave with several fish. Seeing the raw fish, Angela hesitated. She couldn't bring herself to eat it because of the strong smell. Allison tried to convince her it was the only way to survive, but she could only take a small bite before giving up. Her strength began to fade from hunger, which deeply worried Allison. In desperation, he made a risky decision to sneak into the Japanese camp for food. That night, he covered his body with mud to hide his scent and appearance, then carefully crawled through the trees, silently moving in the darkness and waiting for the right moment. When deep night fell and many soldiers were asleep, Allison finally saw his chance. Slowly and carefully, he crawled into one of the tents, holding his breath to avoid making any sound. Inside, he managed to gather some food. Among the items, he found a small comb. Without hesitation, he took it, not as something necessary, but as a simple gift for Angela, a small sign of care in the middle of danger. The next morning, he decided to surprise her. He placed flowers on a rock and left the comb beside them, then hid nearby to watch her reaction. When Angela saw the flowers and the comb, she was touched, but she gently explained that she could not use it because after taking her vows, she had cut her hair very short, like other novices. Realizing the gift was useless, Allison told her to throw it away. Nevertheless, Angela smiled softly, showing she appreciated the gesture. From that moment, it became clear that Allison could no longer hide his feelings. He had fallen in love with her. He began to gather the courage, and one day asked whether she had ever thought about leaving her religious life and living as an ordinary woman, possibly getting married and having a family. But Angela looked at him with her usual calmness. She explained that her vows were not just promises, they were sacred commitments to God. She made it clear that the love in her heart belonged only to God, not to a man like him. Hearing this, Allison felt his heart break, but deep inside, he still held onto a small hope that she might one day change her mind. At that moment, a powerful explosion shook the forest around them. The ground trembled and distant gunfire echoed. Allison ran out of the cave and saw the sky filled with smoke and flashes of light from a battle at sea. American warships had engaged the Japanese fleet. When the sounds of battle began to fade, Allison approached the area where the Japanese camp had been. He was surprised to discover they had left in a hurry. He called Angela, and together they explored the area. They found many abandoned supplies, food, and equipment. It was a rare opportunity to gather everything they desperately needed. That night they laughed, sang, and danced together, trying to forget all their suffering. As the sun was setting, Allison quietly hummed a tune while Angela calmly sewed nearby. The atmosphere was warm and peaceful until he could no longer hold back his feelings. He asked what she would do if they were rescued and returned to the United States. Angela honestly replied that she would return to her monastery, finish her training, and continue serving God. Her answer broke his heart again. He lowered his head for a moment, then admitted he wanted to marry her, build a family, and have children. Angela fell silent, then looked at him with tears in her eyes. She said she was deeply moved by his sincerity but could not give him false hope. She showed him the ring on her finger and explained that it symbolized her vow of devotion to God. After completing her training, she would replace it with a gold one as a sign of lifelong commitment. Allison said nothing, trying to hide his sadness. Angela sat quietly, staring toward the sea. Deep inside, she also had feelings she could not admit. She admired his courage and kindness, but knew giving in would betray her calling. As evening fell, silence filled the old house where Japanese soldiers once lived. While preparing food, Angela found a bottle of alcohol among the supplies. Allison explained it was sake, a traditional Japanese drink similar to wine. He offered her some, but she refused after learning it contained alcohol. Overwhelmed by emotions, Allison drank it alone. Soon, the alcohol took effect. He lost control and said things that hurt and frightened Angela. Upset, she ran out into the pouring rain in the darkness. Realizing his mistake, Allison immediately ran after her. He found her lying on the ground, weak and trembling from the cold. In panic, he carried her back to the cave and lit a fire to warm her. With no other option, he covered her with his clothes to keep her from freezing. The next morning, things became even worse. Japanese troops returned to the island, and Angela was still suffering from fever. Without hesitation, Allison sneaked into the enemy camp again at night to get blankets and food. This time, he was nearly caught. A Japanese soldier spotted him, but Allison managed to overpower him and hide the body. When Angela woke up, she was surprised to find herself lying under a blanket. Allison quickly explained everything and sincerely apologized, but the danger was not over. Realizing one of their soldiers was missing, the Japanese began a large-scale search. They burned parts of the forest and searched every corner of the island.